Enoch warned the giants and the watchers of the world, "Repent, or face God's wrath." They ignored him. Then the floodgates of heaven burst open, and water crashed over the earth, wiping out everything in its path. Only one thing survived: a massive ship known as the Ark. 5 months later, the waters receded. The Ark came to rest on a mountaintop. A man named Noah stepped out, and civilization began again.
His body was as white as snow, and red as the blooming of a rose, and the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes beautiful. And when opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very bright. The Book of Noah, Book 3, Chapter 1. And now make known to thy son Lamech that he who has been born is in truth his son, and call his name Noah, for he shall be left to you, and he and his sons shall be saved from the destruction which shall come upon the earth on account of all the sin and all the unrighteousness which shall be consummated on the earth in his days. The Book of Noah, Book 3, Chapter 18.
So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof an opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark, and make lower, middle, and upper decks. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. The waters kept receding steadily from the earth, so that they had gone down by the end of the 150 days. On the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on one of the mountains of Ararat.
Versions of the Ark story appear in nearly every culture and religion around the world. But everyone still wonders, were Noah and the Ark real? Some claim there is compelling evidence, so shocking that it was classified by the CIA for nearly 50 years. That raises a bigger question. Why classify it?
Here what you have to visualize is a tsunami sweeping over the land that's over 1,000 feet deep. That's what happened here. And we know that because we can trace the high water marks on the hillsides are clearly left. The high water marks are clearly etched into the hillsides. I think that the evidence is consistent with what I will call a mega-scale pluvial event over North Africa. Most likely consistent with the Pleistocene-Holocene transition and the great flooding events that we know are well documented from other places in the world.
We believe that God has preserved in the earth and under the seas remains of the major events discussed in the Bible. Physical remains.
Oh, look at that. Oh, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute, let me get a close-up of that. Kind of,
You want my hand in there for?
Yeah, just to point at those little flakes of iron that are coming out, like right there. There and there. Huh.
This data does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure.
This is the west bulkhead.
All right.
That was over there. And he walked easterly Here we start getting the longitudinal bulkheads. Here, here, here, here, here, here, here, here.
As a scientist, do you really honestly believe that you have been on the remains of Noah's Ark?
I have no doubt in my mind. This has to be a man-made structure. It's full of metal. Metal has a regular pattern. The size of the thing and the shape of the thing it's almost certainly a large boat.
There are two controversial claims concerning this. First, the ark may be older than traditionally believed. Second, the man called Noah might not have been just a man, at least not one from earth. One person that investigated this shocking truth was James Bruce, born in 1730 to a wealthy Scottish family. He was expected to pursue law, but instead he chased a far more ambitious goal to discover the source of the Nile River. At the time, that quest captured imaginations much like the space race would centuries later. Bruce spent over a decade going into Africa's deserts and dealing with political conflicts. He also worked with kings, survived disease, and endured hunger. Eventually, he found himself in the Tigray highlands of Ethiopia near a monastery and found a spring that seems to be the Nile's source. But this was not all that he found. There he also saw some ancient manuscripts that were written in Ge'ez, an old Semitic language. James Bruce was told this book was the Bible. Not a Bible, the Bible. These texts seem to represent some parts of the Bible that have been hidden for a long time. Biblical and Quranic accounts have mentioned the Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon, impressed by his wisdom and wealth, and returning home with gifts exchanged between them. Ethiopian tradition adds to the story, claiming that Sheba bore Solomon a son, Menelik I. As an adult, Menelik traveled to Jerusalem, met his father, declined an offer of kingship, and returned to Ethiopia. But before Menelik left, some of his men stole the Ark of the Covenant and brought it back to Ethiopia. And the Ark of the Covenant remains there today in the town, Axum at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. James Bruce was captivated by these unfamiliar texts. He was a well-read and highly educated man who knew the scriptures well, yet the Ethiopian writings contained hundreds of stories that did not appear in the Bible he knew. The Ethiopian Bible includes 81 books. The Catholic Bible excludes 8 of those and contains 73, while the King James Bible, the version familiar to Bruce, has only 66. Yet in the older texts, there was far more detail. Individuals who were mentioned only briefly in the modern Bible had their entire lives recorded in the Ethiopian version, including their families, accomplishments, and failures. At first, Bruce could not understand why so much of what seemed to be the original material had been removed. Then he found his answer. As he turned the stiff, dusty pages, he discovered the Book of Enoch. Bruce knew Enoch as the great-grandfather of Noah, and a figure referenced only briefly in the Bible. Yet here was a complete book devoted to him, consisting of 108 chapters. Bruce began to see why the church might have wanted the text concealed. It portrayed heaven not only as a spiritual realm, but also as a physical place that human beings could visit. Such an idea would have been considered heretical. According to Orthodox belief, no mortal could enter heaven and return. However, Enoch was said to have done exactly that, and to have recorded everything he witnessed. Instead of describing heaven as a place where souls float on clouds playing harps, the text depicts it as a city in the sky with many chambers, walls adorned with shining gems, and powerful beings carrying out their tasks. Though Enoch would not have understood it in those terms, the description resembles what some might interpret as a spacecraft. For centuries, the Book of Enoch disappeared completely from mainstream religious circulation. That changed in 1947 when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered near Qumran. Among the nearly 1,000 manuscripts, there were 11 copies of Enoch. Discovery of the Book of Enoch. It's all in the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish work that the world thought was lost until the 18th century, when it was rediscovered. Its sudden discovery played a major role in modern scholarship on Second Temple Judaism, and before that time, its knowledge was extremely limited. Only fragments and references in early Christian writers hinted at its existence. The full text is still preserved in the Ethiopian Christian tradition, where it's part of the biblical canon and preserved in the Ge'ez language. The breakthrough came through the Scottish explorer James Bruce, who traveled in Ethiopia and in 1773 returned to Europe with 3 complete Ge'ez manuscripts of the Book of Enoch. And these were the first full copies known to Western scholars and were eventually deposited in major European libraries. Bruce's effort brought this book back to light after it had been lost to people outside of Ethiopia for centuries. Once in European hands, the Book of Enoch gradually attracted a lot of attention. The first English translation appeared in 1821, and later important editions in the late 19th and early 20th century helped establish the text. But there were many questions about its origins until a new discovery emerged in the mid-20th century. Between 1946 and 1956, archaeologists uncovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea. Among these manuscripts, there were Aramaic fragments of the Book of Enoch, dated to around the 3rd to 1st centuries BCE, and these fragments matched portions of the Ethiopian text and confirmed that the book was known and circulated in ancient Jewish circles long before Bruce's rediscovery. This evidence established that the version preserved in Ethiopia was not a later forgery or invention, but rooted in genuinely ancient material. But there's something strange. Even with all these discoveries, the Book of Enoch is still excluded from many Jewish and Christian biblical canons. What did Enoch experience? And why is it excluded from the normal Bible? Enoch's journey to heaven. In the Book of Enoch, Enoch's journey to heaven is depicted as an extraordinary traversal of celestial realms that places him in the presence of divine realities far beyond ordinary human experience. According to the text, Enoch is called and guided by heavenly beings, probably angels like Uriel, and is lifted upward through various levels of heaven, observing places and beings that represent the cosmos. The narrative in 1 Enoch 14 describes this ascent very vividly. Enoch is borne upward, encountering realms marked by crystal walls, fire, and angelic hosts, before reaching a majestic throne described as the Great Glory, radiating light and surrounded by countless heavenly beings. Here, Enoch is brought before the divine presence and receives revelations about the cosmos, the fate of souls, and hidden knowledge related to creation and judgment. In the book, the Enoch recounts what he saw with his eyes as a human being transported beyond Earth's realm into spaces associated with divine authority and cosmic order. Enoch sees the abodes of the righteous and the wicked, the punishment of fallen angels, which are the watchers, and even the heavenly books that record human deeds and celestial laws. However, it's important to note that many scholars say that this is part of religious and mythical text, and not part of the normal Bible. When the Book of Enoch is not part of the canonical Jewish or most major Christian scriptures, although fragments of it were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the canon Bible, the book of Genesis only says that when Enoch was old because he walked with God, he was taken up to heaven directly instead of dying. Some theologians say that this might mean he was taken to God's presence without experiencing death. But in other interpretations, there's the idea that this was something otherworldly, or even a technological encounter. Maybe Enoch was describing a spacecraft, and not actually heaven, and was taken up by aliens. It's like the earliest alien encounter in the world, if this is the case. Enoch's journey to heaven seems to resemble an alien abduction scenario. He hears a vibrating sound in the sky, sees a bright sphere of light descend over his village, and is physically taken into the sky by a being named Uriel. Enoch being taken up to heaven, a structured place with rooms, no gates, and luminous beings, could be a spacecraft or mothership through the lens of ancient religious language. The Watchers seem to be radiant humanoid beings who taught humans, and these might be extraterrestrials. Their mating with human women seems to be some form of human-alien hybridization program, as the Nephilim are more like hybrids than just giants from the myths. The Dogon tribe of West Africa is a good example. As they possessed advanced astronomical knowledge about Sirius B before modern telescopes, which means humans had contact with these aliens from the Sirius star system a long time ago. But the Book of Enoch holds a lot of forbidden knowledge that we have questions about, and that takes us to these fallen angels which Enoch saw, also known as the Watchers. The Watchers and forbidden knowledge. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers are a group of heavenly beings that were first sent to observe humanity, but they instead committed a profound transgression by descending to earth, taking human wives, and imparting secret knowledge that was not meant for mankind. The text says that this was not a casual misstep, but a deliberate and organized act of rebellion led by figures such as Semyaza or Shemihaza and Azazel. The Watchers made a binding pact together on Mount Hermon, pledging to abandon their heavenly duty and share forbidden arts with humans, violating the divine order. Once on Earth, the Watchers fundamentally altered the trajectory of human culture by teaching concealed skills and sciences. These teachings included the art of metallurgy and advanced weapon-making, such as forging swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. They also led warfare that weaponized these technologies and introduced cosmetics and adornments. Beyond material technology, the Watchers also introduced occult and celestial knowledge. They offer instruction in sorcery and incantations, root-cutting, astrology, and the interpretation of heavenly bodies, and other practices related to divination. Some of their teachings involved observation of the sun's and moon's signs and manipulating celestial lore. But by bringing all this knowledge to Earth, they didn't lead to development. Instead, it sped up the rate of human corruption. Instead of being a measured progression, these arts were suddenly introduced to humans, leading to violence, vanity, promiscuity, idolatry, and spiritual disorientation. Weaponry fuels relentless conflict, cosmetics heighten personal pride and lust, while sorcery and astrology draw people away from trusting divine authority. The consequences were dramatic. The Watchers' hybrid offspring, the Nephilim, came out next, and that was what caused the great flood that had to cleanse the earth. The Nephilim. In ancient texts, especially in the Book of Genesis and 1 Enoch, the Nephilim are depicted as extraordinary beings whose presence is linked to the actions of the Watchers, a group of divine beings who rebelled against heavenly boundaries by mating with human women. The Hebrew Bible first mentions the Nephilim in Genesis 6:1-4, where it states that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and bore children to them. They were mighty men and figures of great renown, although their nature is left ambiguous in the canonical text. The term Nephilim is derived from a Hebrew root, meaning to fall or fallen ones, but the exact meaning remains debated. Ancient translations like the Green Gigantes led to the traditional association with giants. In the Book of Enoch, the offspring of the Watchers, the Nephilim, are described as giant hybrid beings with enormous size and strength, sometimes depicted in the text as consuming vast amounts of food and dominating the world. Their existence is portrayed as deeply corrupting. They oppress humanity, contribute to violence, and disrupt the moral order of the world. The rise of the Nephilim intensifies the wickedness on earth to such an extent that it becomes one of the central reasons for divine judgment through the Great Flood. Or there are other interpretations of the Nephilim. Some say that these represent moral collapse, while others say that these are mythic figures meant to explain evil and divine justice in early Jewish thought. Because the sources of this myth are ambiguous, there are different readings and interpretations about this. The rise of the Nephilim intensifies the wickedness on earth to such an extent that it becomes one of the most important reasons for divine judgment through the Great Flood. And it was this experience in the Book of Enoch that led to Noah's experience as he tried to protect all living things in the ark. Expanded Noah narrative. In the Book of Enoch, Noah is more than just that brief account that you find in Genesis. In the Enochic narrative, especially in the Apocalypse of Noah, in 1 Enoch 106-107, Noah's birth is described in supernormal terms that set him apart from the ordinary humans. Noah is born to Lamech and his wife with features unlike those of his family. His body is described as white as snow and red like a blooming rose, his hair white like wool, and his eyes beautiful. Upon opening his eyes, he illuminates the whole house like the sun, and even speaks immediately after birth, engaging with the Lord of righteousness. These attributes made his father afraid, and he suspected that the child might not be entirely human, but probably linked to the Watchers. Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, takes this concern to Enoch, who by this point has been taken up by God. In the Enochic account, Methuselah reports Noah's unusual birth to Enoch, who reassures him that the child's extraordinary nature signals a divine purpose. Enoch explains that great destruction is coming upon the earth because of widespread wickedness, but this child and his future sons will be preserved through the coming judgment. Enoch instructs that the child be named Noah, a name linked to Genesis to comfort or rest, showing that he is the one who would survive the flood and help restore righteousness. Once Noah grew up, as we know, he and his family stayed in the ark during the Great Flood, along with the male and female of every animal that existed. But the question that researchers are asking is, did this flood cover the entire world, or was it simply where Noah was located? Was the flood local or global? There is currently no scientific evidence that a single or global flood covering the entire Earth happened in the recent past in the way the Genesis account describes. Geological, archaeological, and sea-level data doesn't support a worldwide deluge that wiped out all terrestrial life in the last 10,000 years. One idea related to the flood myths is the Black Sea deluge hypothesis, which was first proposed by marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman in the late 1990s. Their model suggests that around 7,500 to 8,800 years ago, rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age caused the Mediterranean Sea to breach a natural barrier at the Bosporus Strait and rapidly flood a much smaller freshwater Black Sea basin. This would have dramatically expanded the sea's surface and submerged coastal landscapes, displacing early farming communities, and maybe even inspiring regional flood stories that spread into wider culture. And the geological evidence for this scenario includes submerged ancient shorelines and shifts in fossil assemblages that show a transition from freshwater to saltwater conditions. Some researchers argue that this shock would have been enormous for the people living there. And this could have been memorialized as a great flood in later myths like Noah's story and the Epic of Gilgamesh. But this hypothesis is controversial and not universally accepted. And later sediment studies suggest the sea level rise and area flooded may have been much smaller and more gradual than originally proposed, weakening the case for a catastrophic deluge on the scale often imagined in popular versions of the theory. There are other scientific explorations too, like the debates around the Younger Days impact hypothesis, but none of these support a single global flood event. They show that large regional floods, sea level rises, and climate shifts happened in the past, which might have contributed to the spread of the flood themes in different cultures. It seems like there's no evidence about Noah's Ark, but some point to the Ark on Mount Ararat as the strongest proof. The Ark on Mount Ararat. In eastern Turkey, near the traditional biblical region associated with the mountains of Ararat, a large boat-shaped geological formation has drawn attention for decades as a possible physical trace of Noah's Ark. And this feature was known as the Durupinar site and was first brought to global attention in 1959 when Turkish Army Captain İlhan Durupinar identified it in aerial photographs taken during a NATO mapping mission. The shape measures approximately 538 feet in length, a dimension that has been noted to roughly match the Ark's measurements as described in the Book of Genesis. For many years, independent researchers have interpreted this shape as something more than a natural formation. In recent years, there have been new studies. Soil and rock samples taken from the site revealed traces of clay-like materials, organic matter, and even what appear to be remnants of marine deposits or seafood. Some researchers suggest that this might mean that this area used to be underwater during a time consistent with the ancient flood traditions. What's more, the ground-penetrating radar scans are showing internal structures beneath the surface, and with some features that look like corridors and layered deck-like formations. Even with all these claims and evidence, mainstream scientists and archaeologists are still unconvinced that the Durupinar site is actually Noah's Ark. Many times, geological analysis has shown that the ark-like shape is consistent with natural rock formations created by sedimentary processes and volcanic activity in the region. Now, critics point out that formations like this are not unusual in mountainous terrain, and that metal detector finds or supposed structural anomalies can be explained by the different variations in rock composition rather than human-made construction. After all, there was no wood, nails, or any other boat materials at the site. Claims and debunking of Ron Wyatt. There was one person that made some shocking claims about Noah's Ark, causing a frenzy for many years, until the world realized that there was no truth in his words. That was Ron Wyatt, one of the most controversial figures of the late 20th century. Wyatt, an American nurse anesthetist with no formal training in archaeology or ancient history, asserted that he had discovered many major biblical artifacts and sites, including Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, the Red Sea crossing, and remains of Sodom and Gomorrah. He also claimed to have found objects such as chariot wheels, or ancient temple artifacts, and even blood from the crucifixion site. These sensational assertions made Wyatt a popular figure among some Bible-believing audiences, but sparked intense skepticism from scholars and scientists. The main problem with Wyatt's claims is that they were never published in any journals or subjected to the kind of scrutiny required for it to be accepted in the scientific and archaeological community. He basically bypassed all the scientific methods, presenting findings directly to the public through videos, books, or lectures. Experts also highlighted that many of the objects Wyatt identified as ancient artifacts have natural or alternative explanations. For example, the boat-shaped formation he claimed was Noah's Ark has been studied by geologists and is widely regarded as a natural rock formation rather than wooden remains of a vessel. Our marine archaeologists have also found no scientific evidence supporting his assertions of chariot wheels or human remains at the proposed Red Sea crossing site. But there's another aspect to the investigation into Noah's Ark. Do you think these were just myths made up by primitive people? Or is this really something that shaped our planet millennia ago? Let's know your thoughts in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.